Hey everybody, Kris Gethin here. Now, if you're over the age of 35, like myself, your enzyme levels have already begun to decline. Enzymes are the workhorses of digestion. They break down your food into usable macro and micronutrients. Now, research shows that the time that someone hits 65 years old, their saliva and pancreatic secretions, both of which involved in enzyme activity, have declined by as much as 50%. Now, if you've looked at my Instagram posts, my stories, you'll notice that quite often if I'm eating out, if I'm having a steak or something like that, I am eating my Masszymes by Bioptimizers. Now, the reason why I take this is because it has over 102% more proteins than the nearest competitor and 300 to 500 more per serving the most popular brands. Now, this is crucial because as us being bodybuilders or athletes, we require a lot of protein. And it isn't just about how much you eat, it's always how much you absorb. So you got to break it down. So not only does the Masszymes contain more proteins, it also contains 13 additional enzymes, including lipase for fat digestion, which work at a very high pH level from 2 to 12. In other words, at every state of digestion. So you can try this right now today, risk-free. They're 365 day, let me get that right, 365 day full money back guarantee is the gold standard. So if you feel that Masszymes are going to help you upgrade your digestion like mine and power through your food, their support team will give you a no question asked refund. And when you go to masszymes.com/Kris20, be sure to enter that coupon code Kris20 to receive a 20% discount off that order. Hey everybody, Kris Gethin here. Welcome to another episode of the Knowledge and Mileage podcast. I'm extremely excited about this episode in particular. The guest that I have on here has been a long time coming, and I've listened to this gentleman on many podcasts in the past, so I really applaud you, Shawn, for getting onto so many shows and really spreading the word that the medical industry really needs to know. Because unfortunately, we get a lot of patients that go to doctors because of various ailments, and they are not given the adequate information to heal themselves. Obviously, you know, it's a money-driven industry, and we know the political front, what's behind that. However, these poor people are going home with a prescription, being told, okay, this is either the way that's going to cure you or this is your death sentence. And you've done an absolute amazing job by going on to shows such as this. Like I listened to your podcast last night with Ryan Lowry. Ryan's a great guy, and you did a fantastic job on this. So, I really want to get this message out. So Shawn Wells is my guest here. And there's a lot we could say about you, Shawn. You've got a huge amount of experience in various assets of this industry. Can you give my listeners a brief background, because we could probably go on for the entire show of what you've done, what you've accomplished, and you're probably just getting started.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And I am a massive fan of all things Kris Gethin. And Ryan Lowry's my best friend, so I appreciate you mentioning him as well. My resume, if you will, my CV is, I almost feel overwhelmed when I hear my own resume. I'm like, how did I accomplish all this?
I bet it must be hard to answer when someone says, what do you do for a living?
It is. It's very hard, but I think the number one thing I do for a living is I stay curious and I serve. And I think that's where everything comes from, is I have been blessed in so many ways with great people around me, with intelligence, and even all my ailments that I've had. You probably saw on my Instagram at Zone Halo today.
Very good, transparent post. Really appreciate that. Respect.
Yeah. So, thank you. But I would say I am a nutritional biochemist. I'm a registered dietitian, certified sports nutritionist, fellow in the ISSN, the International Society of Sports Nutrition, and I'm also known as the world's greatest formulator. I've formulated about 500 products, patented a ton of ingredients, including being involved on tea cream that's in hundreds and hundreds of products, fat burners, pre-workouts, energy drinks. Really great ingredient, similar to, it's in the caffeine family, but without the crash. Just been, again, blessed to just be involved in so many things. I worked clinically for about a decade as a chief clinical dietitian in hospitals and nursing homes. Just I've done a lot. It's been a good career so far, and I'm really excited to continue to do more things. But one of the things that I feel most driven about is just what you were talking about before, and just speaking from my heart, and knowing what I was able to do for myself and what I've been able to do for some other people. And the hospital, the healthcare system, it's frustrating the way it's built. As you know, to your point, it was built on an authoritarian doctor system where the doctor tells you what to do and you say, yes, sir. And then insurance got involved and reinforced that. And you're just told, okay, take this medication. Okay, you have this disease and therefore you are this disease. And things aren't looked at globally, holistically anymore. You're looked at symptomatically and a drug to treat that symptom, which is super frustrating. We need to have a very different approach. And you are seeing naturopathic doctors come to the forefront. You're seeing functional medicine for those that are probably more affluent, getting to use that. But there's still a lot of people that I feel like are preyed upon to take drugs for the rest of their lives. I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen the Chris Rock, like one of his comedy shows where he talked about what's the last thing we cured? Polio? And he's talking about it's no different than the drug dealer on your corner. It's all about the comeback, right? Like he's giving away his, cocaine or crack or, whatever. So you keep coming back. And it's the same with all these medications. The great cholesterol farce, right? How many people are on statins? And they actually make people more sick and reduce your mortality, not increase it.
Exactly.
And it's horrendous what we're doing. All of our cells are cholesterol based. Our brain is largely cholesterol based. Our hormones, cholesterol based. And what we're doing with these statins quite often is depleting CoQ10 and creating insufficient cellular energy scenarios that actually sets you up for pretty much all disease and aging. And the fact that this is going on is incredibly frustrating, and no one seems to be addressing it. And the way we actually look at cholesterol is wrong as well, because total cholesterol, HDL, LDL are all calculated, and we're not looking at specific subfractions of cholesterol that we need to look at. Like, for example, when you're on keto, your LDL might go up. Is that a bad thing? Not necessarily. Actually, the large, fluffy LDL subfraction is correlated with better health. There's only one subfraction that's correlated with negative health in terms of cardiovascular risk, and that's the small, dense LDL, the very low density lipoprotein. And you can look at certain markers, like you can look at that with what's called a VAP test or an NMR test, or you can get a lab that looks at ApoA to ApoB ratio. But doctors are not looking at any of these. They're just saying, yep, you got high cholesterol, so let's put you on the statin. Higher cholesterol is correlated with longer life. There's no data on what they're doing. And yet they keep dropping. If you actually look at what they've done over the last 20 years, they keep dropping like where the threshold is for hypercholesterolemia. And guess what that means? More people on these drugs. Guess what
Hmm.
that means? More money to big pharma. And it's very frustrating at how many people are on these drugs and how it's literally killing people.
It's well,
I'm
it's
saying this, I don't want to be executed or sued or whatever, but you know what I'm saying. This is
Yeah, for
frustrating.
sure. It's essential that they have some sort of dependence, because how are they going to lobby the government? And obviously, we know, like, the cane sugar industry, the high fructose corn syrup, from the corn, the soybean, all of these industries are collaborators that are actually funding a lot of the candidates that are going for the presidency, electrician, whatever. But we could really go off on one there. But I want to pull this back a little bit to begin with, for instance, you mentioned the ketogenic diet there. So keto is a huge buzzword. It has been for about the past year now. People will say, oh, it's going through another fad, but obviously that's not going to happen, because there's so much clinical research and data that is coming up now showing that the benefits that the ketogenic lifestyle can have for people that are dealing with various ailments or not, especially in this day and age when we are surrounded by a toxic environment, and that's namely from the foods that we're putting into our body. So you've been following the ketogenic diet now for over 20 years now. So that makes you, number one, you've got a lot of mileage there, but you've got a lot of knowledge that backs this up. Can you tell us why you got onto the ketogenic diet and why it's essential now that you stay on a ketogenic diet?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, about 2 decades, like you said, doing that. And it started out with a book by Dan Duchesne, who I don't know if you remember
Oh,
him,
yeah,
but with
yeah. I
Bill.
remember all of
Okay.
his underground his
Yeah,
books.
yeah, exactly. Dirty dieting, all that kind of stuff. He was really on the forefront of some really cutting edge supplements slash pro hormones and very much into anabolics, along with my friend William Llewellyn and Patrick Arnold and some of these guys. But he was really pushing the envelope. And one of the things he had was this body opus book that talked about the ketogenic diet for bodybuilders and getting ripped by using the ketogenic diet. And I was reading this book and just blown away, because what is it we're all told to do, like pre-contest, or getting ready to lean down, you got to go super low fat, right? And super low sodium and water and all that kind of stuff. And this is like the complete opposite end of the spectrum. He's saying eat 80% fat to get ripped. And it was just mind blowing, and just reading it. And I started to experiment with it. And then shortly thereafter, a book came out by Lyle McDonald.
Yeah.
Again, about 20 years ago, he was pretty ahead of his time for the practitioner. So it was from more of a clinical perspective. But again, like I was just reading these books and I'm like, what? This is crazy. This is absolutely crazy. And then, I got talking to my mom, who had inspired me with supplements my whole life, and where I got some of my passion from, because she sold Shackley back in the 70s. And, she had the whole tackle box with like all the different like little pills, right? She was way ahead of her time with that stuff. But she had done the Atkins diet back in the 70s, and she was like, yeah, like this always worked for me, but for some reason everyone just kind of forgot about it and stopped doing it. And I started experimenting with it, and not only did I lose about 20 pounds in a month and just got lean, but I felt so much better, and I couldn't figure out what was going on. And so I'd get on and off it, because back then it was hard. One, I was just a younger person, and just cooking up eggs and bacon and sausage and heavy cream and cheese, and I thought that was pretty much all I could do on the keto diet. Things are a lot more evolved now, as options you have, recipes that are out there, all these things. But I would be on it, for a month at a time, and maybe get off for a month, but keep going back to it, because I kept feeling tremendous, and I couldn't figure out what that was. Now I know exactly what that is. And that's come to me. And that's one of the reasons I've really dug into this over the years, because I have autoimmunity issues. Um, Fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue. It really may have stemmed from Epstein-Barr that I got at one point. Um, I had autoimmune hepatitis, which is swelling of the liver. Just really struggled day to day with energy. And people that have autoimmune conditions, as well as so many different disease states, it all stems from mitochondrial dysfunction. And if you guys remember that are listening, the mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell, like, back in biology, right? This little organelle in the cell that creates ATP, the body's energy, the cellular energy that we use. And when we have insufficient cellular energy states, ICE is the acronym, then we're short. We're short. There's a gap that's created from the energy we need and what we have. And this gets exacerbated when we have the mitochondrial dysfunction. And almost, like I said, every disease state, anti-aging, whatever you call it, tracks back to mitochondrial dysfunction. Interestingly, we have glucose intolerance, right? So almost everyone, as we age, because we're doing a high carb diet, high glycemic carbohydrate, ultra processed food, we're in a hypercaloric state. We very rarely fast. We rarely exercise. We're largely sedentary. We're eating and drinking things that are exacerbating all this. And so we're becoming more and more glucose intolerant. And what that means is we're creating that insufficient cellular energy state because the mitochondria aren't able to take in that glucose, use the glucose, and create ATP from it. So does that happen with ketones? No. Maybe in 1 out of 100,000 people, there's like some ketone resistance, but there isn't a state typically of glucose or a ketone resistance like there is glucose. So this is fascinating because almost every disease, I'm telling you, literally cardiovascular disease, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, type 2 diabetes, like I said, aging, you can literally just go through the list and everything tracks back to mitochondrial dysfunction. What are the ways that shows in your body? I'll go through a couple. Inflammation, glycation, which is blood sugar damage, and oxidation, which is, a state of cellular damage. And same with glycation, it's cellular damage, and inflammation when chronic creates damage. So these are the results of that mitochondrial dysfunction. And no one's talking about this. No one's talking about ketones bypass mitochondrial dysfunction. Ketones give you the fuel source that you need. And this is why people that have in particular metabolic syndrome, which is type 2 diabetes, hypertension, obesity, etc., they feel like this boom, like cognitive clarity. They feel this energy. Now they move better. They feel better. It's not just like everyone gets like some improvement in body composition. Everyone gets some satiety effects from ketones. But in particular, people that have autoimmunity, that have type 2 diabetes, that have Alzheimer's, that have all these things, get clarity, get movement, get their life back because they're getting their energy back.
Got it. Yeah, for sure. So, one thing that I did last year for about 8 months, and I reached out to you at some point to get some assistance on this or some advice. For about 8 months, I was following like a cyclical ketogenic diet and intermittent fasting with that as well, because as I'd get out of ketosis in the evening, maybe have some fruits, berries, I'd want to get myself back into ketosis pretty quick the next day, and I'd fast throughout the day. And I felt exactly what you said. I reduced myself of inflammation. I went and had all my food allergy and blood panel markers done beforehand and during and after. Drastically reduced, more mental clarity, one thing that I've found as well, because I've started introducing carbohydrates again now on a more consistent basis, however, I'll still fast once or twice a week, is that I have much more mental clarity, but I've rid myself of all cravings. And one thing that I've noticed when you eat a lot of carbohydrates, whether that be coming from a healthy source, quote unquote healthy source, it does instigate more cravings. So when you're dieting down, particularly people in my industry getting ready for a physique contest or something like that, cravings are prevalent. But I found following the ketogenic diet was a great reset. And that's something that I suggest to a lot of people. Like my fiance's mother, she tried following the typical 5 or 6 meals a day, just a little and often. And that worked. It did work for about a year. But that was short term because it started to reverse itself, started getting more cravings, didn't want to have so many meals. So now she is on more of a keto lifestyle and fasting with it, which seems a lot more manageable for her being overweight and now maintaining a lower weight. So I think it's a great reset for a lot of people, especially people that aren't sports performance athletes as well. They just want to live a healthier lifestyle. Now, the anti-inflammatory benefits were very, very obvious to me because I hope my father's not listening to this, but like he's not overweight, but he has a bit of a little bit of distension in his stomach. Mm-hmm. And I honestly thought, wow, is this in my genes? Maybe this is something that's happening to me because I had so much bloat. And I'd start working my transverse abdominis every day, hoping that it's not stretching itself or it's got a thin fascia. But now I have no inflammation whatsoever, no bloating at all, even if I have to eat a larger meal, which I think is fantastic. Now, one of the things that obviously you have this inflammatory response in, what I consider not my second brain, but my first brain now, which can lead to a chemical response in your brain, like you said, if it becomes chronic, systemic. So when it comes to that inflammatory response that can turn into a chemical response, do you think that is possibly why, or maybe one of the contributors as to why we're seeing more people diagnosed with bipolar-like symptoms, depression, suicidal thoughts, and maybe Alzheimer's, Parkinson's as well?
Yeah. Well, yes. Inflammation, like I said, is a result of the mitochondrial dysfunction, the chronic inflammation state. We know that inflammation is actually good. It's one of the ways that you build muscle.
Like
it's one of the ways that you, that you have an immune response that's healthy when you fight a virus or pathogen, right? It can be healthy. It's just we're in the state of chronic inflammation, and we're finding out that adipose can generate a lot of this inflammation itself, and it's an organ. We thought it was just an inert tissue, but there's crosstalk like between muscle and adipose, and this adipose is just as active as your gut or your brain or some of these other things. Like they're actually promoting hormones, they're talking, they're signaling, and we're in this chronically inflamed state because of excess adiposity, too much fat, and also, like I said, the mitochondrial dysfunction throughout the body. We are in a state where the mitochondria are not working correctly, and we don't have enough. When we exercise, when we challenge ourselves, when we eat correctly, we can actually not only promote better mitochondrial function, we can actually promote, like especially through the ketogenic diet and fasting, mitochondrial biogenesis, where we actually create more mitochondria. So that's nice. Like when you not only, let's say an example is maybe you have like a horse-drawn carriage, and now you have the strong Clydesdale, right? And then you also have more Clydesdale. So, you go from 4 to 10, you're going to be able to pull that cart better. You're going to create more energy.
Right. Okay. Got it. So let's talk a little bit about something that affects everybody, that somebody we know is suffering the effects of possible dementia or Alzheimer's. Whether it be, and obviously as I get a little bit older, I'm experiencing it about, with people that I love and care about. And, there doesn't seem to be much out there within the medical field where people say, well, hey, this could possibly be prevented. We could possibly prevent this from becoming worse. And I've heard you say before that it's, it can be really touching when you see people that you love or people that love talking to somebody who is a ghost of their former self. There's fear in their eyes, they're scared, and they don't recognize the person that they're talking to anymore. Is there something that can be done for these people that, obviously, that we have, everybody has a very different genetic disposition where they could encounter that possibility earlier rather than later? Is this something that we can do for any of these people in regards to nutrition, and what is it?
100%. Let me go down through a few of them. One, I think no one should be arguing right now we should all be eating whole food, call it paleo, ancestral, Whole30, whatever. We should all be eating whole food and start from there. Ultra-processed food is a new phenomenon and is killing us. And you go down the line with, we don't know all the effects of glyphosate, antibiotics, RBGH, RBST, and artificial sweeteners, flavors, colors, GMOs, all this stuff. It didn't exist, right? 80 years ago. So we don't have to go back to paleo times to talk about, what the cavemen were eating. I can tell you what my grandfather was eating, and it's a lot different than what we're eating now. And they don't even call it processed food anymore. It's called ultra processed food. And it's high bliss point. Now food engineers are working against your brain to try and make you overeat, override satiety. An example of this is if I took a handful of almonds and gave you raw almonds, you'd only eat, 5 or 10. If I roast them, it brings out some flavor. If I coat them with oil, if I add salt to them, if I add honey to them, if I add spice, habanero, now it's honey habanero that's coated with oil, that's roasted. Now you're going to overeat the heck out of these things.
Because you got sugar and fat together.
Sugar and fat. And where does sugar and fat occur in nature? It doesn't. It doesn't occur in nature. And what happens is that's bliss point, because you're getting that fatty mouthfeel, and then you're getting that high glycemic dopamine hit, and this is triggering your brain in a lot of different ways that you're only meant for one of these things to happen in food. But when you have soda, for example, you get the acidity, the bubbles, the sweetness, these things are literally made to override and give you that hit that's I need more. And the scientists not only have worked on this bliss point, but they actually make it so that it's sweet and flavorful up front and empty on the back. So you keep continuing to drink it because you keep wanting more.
Yeah, and you're not fulfilling your nutrient profile.
Fulfilled. So they've worked on this, and it's really frustrating. And then, of course, you take into the fact that we are sedentary, that we are overeating, and it's a number of these things that are happening. But absolutely, could we do something? If we ate whole food, yes, that would be one thing. If we exercised more and obviously improved our insulin sensitivity, the GLUT4 receptor translocation, taking glucose into the cell, I think people can have carbs. But you need to earn your carbs. You need to be active for your carbs. There's no deficiency for carbs. And the problem is we're getting these super high glycemic carbs. We're having too much, too often, and then not exercising. And again, this isn't typical. If we went back hundreds of thousands of years ago, or again, maybe even 100 years ago, we had to look for our food. We had to work for our food. We had to earn our food. We had to grow our food. We had to hunt for our food. And it was difficult, and it expended calories, and it wasn't just omnipresent in a vending machine or delivered by Amazon or just surrounding us like it is now. And it's overwhelming because we see it in the vending machine. We see it at the fast food place. We see it in the commercials. We're surrounded by food and calories in a way that is so different from hundreds of years ago.
Yeah, like when we saw the introduction of the food pyramid, the number one thing was your grains. So everybody started to go out and purchase cornflakes in the morning, which would basically fire start that bliss point for the rest of the day.
100%. So where did that come from? The whole food guide pyramid, and that's follow the money trail, right? The two cheapest grains are the things that are in our entire food supply. Obviously profit, right? And we were told that they were super healthy, corn and soy. And they're the most GMO things. They're the cheapest things. And with corn, we get, like you said, the corn flakes, the corn tortillas, the maltodextrin that's in everything.
And you find it in about 50% of the food. You'll even find it in bread.
Exactly. And then soy is in everything. It actually makes plastics, and and these oils, right? The vegetable oils from where else? Soy and corn. Where did those come in from? Well, we were told those were healthy because they're vegetable oils. And we were told butter and meat with fat is bad. And yet, again, my grandfather seemed to be healthy when he was having fatty steaks and butter. But then we were told we need margarine, we need Wesson, we need these vegetable oils. Come to find out that all of these high margin things that we were told by our government in the food guide pyramid and all these Ansel Keys driven studies, that these things are actually not healthy for us. We come to find out that they're pro-inflammatory.
Rancid, yeah.
That they're rancid and oxidized, exactly like canola oil, which is still peddled as healthy. But that rapeseed oil, that's actually what canola really is made rancid through the process, is oxidized through the process. So it gets dark and stinks. And then they have to bleach it and deodorize it as a result. And that's what you're getting. And was it ever butter? Was it ever the whole food? No, it was never the whole food. It was always the processed things, the trans fats, these highly processed vegetable oils. All of these ultra processed foods were the things that were unhealthy for us, but we were told they were healthy because of margins.
Yeah, exactly. Now, I know exactly what you're saying, because my grandfather now at 92 years old, forever I always remember him having bacon and eggs at morning for breakfast, not so much cereal or anything like that. And, which is quite different to what people usually have today for breakfast. But, what can I do to ensure that my grandfather and his brain stays in a healthy state? And if there is the onset of Alzheimer's, how can we manage that?
Yeah, so Alzheimer's is type 3 diabetes, and it's actually glucose intolerance, insulin resistance in the brain cells, the neurons. And this is kind of a breakthrough, and it isn't being addressed as type 3 diabetes very much. We're just hearing about some of the plaques, the tau and beta plaques that are in the brain. And they're saying that's the reason, and they're working on all these different medications that might help with the NMDA receptors and all this kind of stuff. But it's actually something called the brain energy gap, which goes back to, again, what I was talking about with insufficient cellular energy. It's the same idea, but essentially the term applies for the brain. And there's that gap, right, where this is the energy we need, which is higher, I'm showing my hands, and lower is where we're coming in at. We're not making enough energy because of that insulin resistance. So again, when you apply fasting, when you apply ketones, exogenous ketones or MCTs, I love the C8 version of MCTs, when you do ketogenic diet, when you do glycogen depletion with exercise, all of these things that raise ketones are helping fuel the brain and give the brain the energy it needs to close that gap. And you see, I don't know if you've ever seen Dr. Mary Newport's book and what she did with her husband that's passed away since, but she was able to take her husband from stage 4 back to stage 1. And they actually do something like you can gauge what stage you're at and your ability to draw a clock with the hands and everything like that. And her husband, wasn't able to draw the clock at all. It was kind of a mess on the piece of paper. And then, as she worked with him, giving him coconut oil, then MCTs, and then eventually she gave him ketone esters, he was able to go back to stage 1. Did it cure him? No, but he had a much longer life and he had a better quality of life. I don't know if you've ever dealt with, like, stage 4, somebody has no idea who you are or where they are. Stage 1, it's just after what would be mild cognitive impairment, MCI. So, they're a little confused at times, but they have a high quality of life.
So basically, what she implemented there was a fasting protocol, removal of all starch carbs, and then implemented the fats, and the exogenous ketones as well.
Yep, exactly. And that helps reverse that state. That helps improve mitochondrial function. And one of the things that, going back to what I was saying, the mitochondrial dysfunction is ketones bypass, let's call this, not to get too deep in the weeds, but there's the electron transport chain, mm-hmm. and there's the secondary complex in that, and it bypasses that. That's where the dysfunction can happen with glucose. And so it bypasses that to give you the energy your body needs. We are meant to be dual fuel. So this is what's really frustrating to me, is when people talk about keto being like this new fad diet. And maybe the nutritional ketogenic diet is kind of a new thing for the most part. I mean, it's been used for 100 years with epileptics. Obviously, it's become big on the internet and, for weight loss and all these things. But when I think of keto, I think of raising ketones. I don't think of like the ketogenic diet per se. That's a strategy to raise ketones. So keto to me means something different. And when I talk about keto, we've been keto for hundreds of thousands of years, however long we've been around as a species. We were meant to be dual fuel. And when we were eating carbs, they were resistant starches by and large. If we ate a raw potato, if we ate a green banana, it's a resistant starch. We could still be in keto. If we were hunting for food, looking for food, working a lot of calories to get food, then we're in a caloric deficit. There's a very good chance we could have been in an elevated ketotic state. If we were eating meat through the winter because we couldn't find some kind of carbs, we're in a ketogenic state. So this is interesting that probably the majority of the time, and all of our foods were pretty much low glycemic back then. And again, we weren't in a hypercaloric state. We didn't have high bliss point foods and processed foods that were high glycemic. And nothing was overriding our satiety, so that if we ate too much, quote unquote, we just wouldn't eat as much later. We'd stay fuller longer. But that doesn't happen anymore. Now we can easily overconsume calories with soda and cake and all these things. So if you look at it, I believe that we were meant to be dual fuel. We were meant to be at least half of the time in a ketogenic state. But we don't fast anymore. We don't, and fasting maybe used to be called starving, right? And it's interesting. Why does the body do some of the things it does when you're starving or in a high ketone state? Much higher than like in a nutritional ketosis, you might be in like this range of like 0.5 to 1.5 millimoles of ketones. But when you do fasting, when you get into a deeper ketogenic state, similar to starving, what are some of the things that happens? Really interesting. You spare lean body mass, right? You protect muscle. And you'll use fat for energy, which you have about 100,000 calories stored on you, even if you're a lean person, like 10% body fat male. 100,000 calories versus the 2,000 calories stored on you in glucose and glycogen. If you're an athlete, which would you rather tap into?
Yeah.
Right? But if you think about that, it's amazing that with all this energy that we can tap into with body fat, with being in this ketogenic state. I mean, that's something that we were literally evolved for. We weren't meant to be high glucose, high glycemic, 24/7, 365. And yet, again, we were being told this, that you need to be on high carbs if you're an athlete. It's healthy to get carbs. Carbs are where you get your energy. Oh, is it? You know, like, does the cheetah seem to struggle because it's not getting enough carbs? Is the cheetah slow because it's not getting enough carbs? I mean, where were we sold this whole thing? Like, we are omnivores and we were meant to be dual fuel. Absolutely, without a doubt. But we've gotten away from that completely. And as a result, we're running into tons of disease. Absolutely tons of disease because of mitochondrial dysfunction that leads to oxidation, inflammation, glycation.
Are there other contributing factors that lead to this as well? Obviously, we're exposed to like 88,000 more acids and paints and lacquers that we once were. The air is a lot more polluted, not just outside, but inside. People aren't changing their air filters. Like I went to Dr. Spanaug's clinic in Oldsmar about 5 years ago, major sleep disorder. And I had all the blood tests, the brain fry scans and everything. And it was down to mold toxicity. I lived in Mumbai for quite a while. It was very humid there, and he believes that's where I may have got it from initially. I'm cured now. My Aura Ring told me I got 7.5 hours sleep last night. I'm much better. But, you know, we have so many different things happening today, not only just in our food supply, but obviously like the antibiotics that's in that food supply, the glyphosate, the air pollutants. We have so much stress exposed to us now. Are these contributing factors as well as the diet?
Without a doubt. And like you said, we're surrounded. And we're told that these things are conspiracies, that they're farces.
Oh, like the phone, being exposed to the phone all the time.
Let me ask you where that comes from. And again, it's similar to the food guide pyramid or the vegetable oils or whatever. It's all, like, if you track it all back, it's all money, it's all profit. And of course, EMFs that are coming from our power lines, what are they going to say? Yeah, you know what? It's hurting you. So we'll let like some class action lawsuit of trillions of dollars happen. Or glyphosate, Roundup, like you mentioned. Who is that owned by? Monsanto, monster multi-billion-dollar company that got bought by a bigger multi-zillion-dollar company, Bayer. And what are they going to do? Are they going to admit? And you can actually see emails where they're going back and forth with each other talking about how carcinogenic it is. Literally, you can get these emails on the internet.
Wow.
And it's all getting buried. And of course, we're blessed to be in an age where we get so much information and have access to information versus that authoritarian doctor kind of, telling you what, you need to believe and what you need to get as far as drugs. And that's great, but sometimes we have a glut of information, and I feel like that's almost done on purpose too. There's disinformation, misinformation put out there that creates a lot of confusion, and that's where like a podcast like this is so helpful. That you get good information here. You have on great guests, and you're passionate about this. This isn't driven by your greedy desire for money. This is driven by you to educate people and help people.
Yeah, it's. I believe like if we're given a purpose and a platform in order to do so, and this is something that I craved when I was growing up, except there was no such thing as cell phones and internet access then, then why not? I feel very lucky, as I'm sure you feel very privileged in order to share this, and that's what we're all after at the end of the day. It isn't money, it's purpose, because that's selfishly, that's going to help with our health span as well and our longevity. We need purpose. So let's just veer off slightly, because I found it very interesting what you said about the EMFs. Like, for instance, with you, do you keep your phone in your pocket? Do you keep it on airplane mode? Do you have a digital detox because you are fully aware of the negative impact that one of these devices can have, whether that be coming from your computer, your phone, etc.?
So I have, what, this is an interesting conversation, because I'm definitely a biohacker and always have been. I go so deep into this stuff, but there's one problem with that is sometimes, speaking of, giving yourself too much information, you can literally create anxiety and stress from having too much information and worrying about this stuff all the time. So I try and educate myself, do what's best for myself, but also not stress about it too much. And I focus, now I've veered more into biohacks on like the gratitude, sunbathing, meditation, daily walks, these kinds of things, mindfulness, presence, be here now, which I found has had a profound impact on my health. And there's some things I just can't control. Like you said with the phone, I have a special case that reduces that. And I also have a phone that I looked up that has less radiation that's put out.
What is that phone?
Pixel, Google Pixel.
Oh, the Google Pixel. Okay, better camera as well.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's important, because here's the thing: even if we control that, about 5G.
Yeah,
5G is coming out, right?
It's going to be right outside everybody's house.
And do you know what's happening is this radiation is attacking your cells, and mitochondrial dysfunction is a result of 5G, and maybe even some DNA damage. So this is happening. I mean, think about, and people are like, no way, this is silly. This is this is conspiracy talk again. If you think about what these waves are penetrating to get to your phone, do you think that if something can penetrate many, many walls, including brick and stone and steel, that it can't penetrate your skin, your bone, your brain? Are you serious? But because of misinformation, it's like people believe that. Like, no way. Like, they wouldn't do that to us. They would.
I believe Dr. McCullough actually proved this when he actually earthed himself, when he held the phone in his hand, and how much EMF and radiation was actually penetrating him, and then when he earthed himself, how much was able to travel through him. So with this in hand, I always try to put my phone off at nighttime or in airplane mode, switch the Wi-Fi off. But like you said, you want to not be over paranoid with it. I think, Dave Sinclair and Ben Greenfield had very good contrasting interviews on Joe Rogan's show, where, Dave Sinclair, really knows his stuff, but he is just specifically into anti-aging, where Ben is into increasing his health span as well, but he wants to kick ass while doing it. And whilst kicking ass, there can be some very slight repercussions, but at least he's enjoying himself, and maybe he's gonna have more purpose, lower his cortisol levels, and feed that adrenaline fix, which could potentially be better, because you want to live your life while you're here as well, and not just be libidoless and just be slack-jawed all the time, knowing that you've got to get to 100 years old or older. You have to live that life. And it's all about balance, isn't it? Like what I do now, eating a little bit more frequently, I know that I'm signaling my mTOR pathway, IGF-1, but I'm trying to do whatever I can, like you said, with mindfulness, making sure that the calorie that I do eat has information that's going to heal me and not harm my future, because I want to continue to do my Ironman events. I want to do ultramarathons. I want to still bodybuild. I want to enjoy my life while I'm here, and hopefully not just increase my longevity. I want to look back when my life flashes before me, and when it flashes, I want it to take a long time as well.
100%. I love that. I went to an event in Sardinia, Italy, which is one of the blue zones, right,
Yeah.
where people live the longest. And I have a foreign exchange student that's become my daughter of sorts, Claudia, and I visit there at least once a year, and she'll come here once a year. But it's an amazing place where people sit down and have a 2 hour meal, and they prepare their food, and it's high quality food, and they have sips of wine, and they fellowship. And that is it. Like, people keep looking for, is it the red wine? Is it the resveratrol in the red wine? Is it maybe that they have a higher fat diet? Is it maybe whole food? Some of those things are it, but the fellowship, the quality of life, the less racing around, the talking to each other over the course of hours, taking that time and making it important, you can't underestimate how important that is. And I was at an event, an anti-aging event in Sardinia, and Jay Shetty was speaking, and he had a profound way of saying what you're talking about. And he said, it's about putting more life in your years than putting more years in your life.
Spot on.
And yeah, exactly. So I agree. Like, we don't want to live to 120 if we're demented for the last 40 years.
Yeah.
We're struggling to get around, hobbling because of our, we have artificial hips and knees, and we struggle with obesity and inflammation and all of these things. Like, we want to have great years. We want to have productive years. And
Yeah.
I totally agree with you. Like, so there's a lot of factors. Like, I've always been focused on like peptides and, like BPC 157, or, like doing these biohacks and these devices I use, PEMF and these supplements like CoQ10 and PQQ and all this stuff. And people are like, what? But, at the end of the day, I think like the giving yourself grace, loving yourself, getting proper sleep, fellowshipping with people is actually more important.
For sure. There's a lot of free, low-hanging fruit that people tend to bypass. It's the same within the industry. They're like, which supplement that you have now, because obviously I've got my own supplement company, which is it that's going to help, and at what time should I take it? But then I'll ask, well, how much sleep are you having? How much are you drinking? What is your recovery? What does your lifestyle look like? And when they can't answer those, or they are, they're subpar. It's like, don't even look at the supplementation. Let's get this foundation first. Don't even be picking out the roof tiles until that we've got the base. And a lot of people bypass, and I was definitely one of those biohackers as well that would, like you said, PEMF, or, I get in my infrared sauna, and then, I'm tracking everything. I'm trying to quantify everything. And then those supplements that you spoke about, the coenzyme Q10 and PQQ, everything is in that shelf. And it takes me like a week to fill out my my tackle box as well. But then I really started to bring things back. I thought, wow, I go to India all this time. Why aren't I focusing on my meditation, my gratitude? Like, that's the holy grail place for that. So that's what I'm focusing on now. That's my next goal, is my spiritual journey, to see what I can encounter and what can I find out there, because there's a lot to be said for that low-hanging fruit. When we're talking sports performance, bodybuilding, people look at calories, they look at how much they consume, how much they can lift, when they're not focusing on how they can lower their cortisol levels, how they can be more grateful, how they can relax a little bit more, how they can fulfill their life and provide themselves, like I said, with a calorie that's going to heal themselves as opposed to just hurt themselves. And I think there's a lot to be said for that, and people bypass it. But we're in a world and a time of instant gratification. We look on Instagram, I want those abs now, I want to have those glutes now. Like, not even thinking about the sacrifice that you do have to make in order to gain that success. So I want to just go on one piece now, because this is very much intrigues me as well, because I have seen firsthand, unfortunately, the rampant growth of cancer. There's cancer that's hitting many people that we love at extremely young ages. When I say young, I'm talking about like 60 years old. It's like, we knew somebody last week that seemed fine, and here they are 3 months later, they've disappeared. I don't know if you know of like Shawn, for instance, who was the in charge of Flex magazine there in the end. Like, he was a person that was, him and Greg Merritt were the people that were responsible for getting my position at Weeder Publications back in 2005. And then I went and met with him. I believe it was August of 2 years ago. 3 months later, he'd passed us, and he was a young, healthy individual. And this happens to so many people that we love now. Like, I know that you have, some success stories of your own in this regard, if you want to call it a success story. I know that's not going to be something that's relevant to everybody, but can you tell us a little bit about your experience with facing cancer and people that you love, and what advice that you give that people aren't necessarily going to get from their physician, their doctor?
Yeah, man, it's the ultimate frustration that this disease is, like you said, killing so many people. And I personally have dealt with a pituitary adenoma that's wreaked havoc on my body. That is a tumor. It's considered benign, like not cancerous, but puts me at a predisposition for a high likelihood of getting cancer in my brain, in the pituitary. And the pituitary is responsible for so much. When I got it, I started getting skinny fat, testosterone in the toilet in the 70s, estrogen and prolactin were sky high, horrible headaches because it was swelling and I didn't realize what it was, and pushing on the back of my eyes. And that's one of the reasons that I really dug into keto and some of this mitochondrial dysfunction and my autoimmunity as well. And it really dramatically changed my health. And I have to stay vigilant on this, or else it comes back, and it can swell, and then again I can get cancer. But I've been open about that and talking about that, and some people have reached out to me regarding cancer. And for those that don't know, cancer is without a doubt 80 to 90% of the time a metabolic disease. It's driven by glucose. Cancer is fueled by glucose. You can look at Dr. Thomas Seyfried's work. We're never told this, but cancer cells are fueled by glucose. Healthy cells are fueled by ketones or glucose. Cancer cells cannot replicate with ketones. So that's one of the reasons why the ketogenic diet could be prophylactic or preventative, or it could be therapeutic in terms of treating cancer the majority of the time. Some cancers are driven by estrogen, like breast cancer quite often. But the majority of the time, cancers are driven by glucose. So I had a woman that came to me with stage 4 glioblastoma multiforme. This was just last year. And stage 4, meaning metastatic, where the cancer really taken over her brain. When you looked at the scans, more than half of the scan looked like tumor, not brain tissue. So, she was on death's door, and she reached out to me and said, I was told I have 6 weeks to live, that I'm getting taken off of chemo and radiation. They're no longer effective, and I need to, just finish my last will and testament, wrap things up, say goodbye to all the people I need to say goodbye to, but I thought I'd reach out to you. And obviously that was a very powerful thing for me. And I wrote up about a 4-page document for her. But the most important things that I told her were the things that I know work with cancer. IV vitamin C, twice a week, had her doing that. Hyperbaric oxygen chamber therapy, very similar to the concept of ketones. Like I said, oxygen at a certain level can be fine and healthy for healthy cells, but can be toxic to cancer cells. And hyperbaric oxygen chamber can work for that. I had her on a intermittent fasting, a 16 and 8, because she was actually still obese, and she was someone that ate largely junk food historically and fast food. Had her on the nutritional ketogenic diet and exogenous ketones and C8 MCTs. And the ketogenic diet was obviously very strict. It wasn't like a cyclical or targeted ketogenic diet. No net carbs, none of that. Like when you're talking about therapeutic for cancer, it needs to be extremely strict, very low, as low carb as you can go, essentially. And 6 weeks later, when she was supposed to be buried, she had a 90% reduction in her tumor.
Unbelievable.
And
Wow.
just think about that, and think about how frustrating that is to me, that these things that are essentially free, when chemotherapy gets fast-tracked by the FDA because people supposedly need it and people are dying without that. So the drug companies get to bypass all the checks that happen normally where drug needs to get studied and proven. Chemotherapy bypasses all that. These things cost $50,000, $100,000 or more per round. You know how much money that is for them to stay on chemo and continue to get radiation and continue to stay sick? And then when they come out of chemo or radiation, what do they get? They get cake and Coke and chips and bullshit.
And they got another life sentence of bills.
Totally, without a doubt, they're locked in, right? And that stress alone, some of these people decide to let their lives go because they're becoming a burden to their loved ones. And all of this, this and the depression and the nausea and the things that happen with chemo and radiation, like, I mean, you know how bleak their existence is? Like, they don't want to go on. Like, essentially, they euthanize themselves either through will or morphine or other drugs. And yet this thing I told her to do in 6 weeks with the death sentence cancer, 6 weeks later, for free almost, she's basically healthy. I wish that's where it ended, but she ended up kind of eating junk food again, and not staying on all those things that I had for her, and getting some of the cancer back because it wasn't completely resolved. And then the doctors convinced her to get back on chemo and radiation, and then she died shortly thereafter.
Wow, I'm sorry to hear that.
It's frustrating. It's very, very frustrating. And one of the most frustrating things is when I asked her, like, hey, this is amazing what happened. Like, when she told me the results and showed me the scans, and they're mind-blowing side by side. She said, I said, did anyone tell you about, keto or, any of the things that I told you, IV vitamin C, hyperbaric oxygen chamber, any of that stuff? No one told me about any of that. None of my doctors. It was only you that talked about that. And I was just like, really? Like, when there was 6 weeks left and she was taking off everything, they couldn't say, hey, you know what? Shot in the dark here. Let's just try. I've heard this crazy rumor. Some people are saying this stuff works. Maybe try keto. Maybe try some ketones. Maybe try, MCTs, IV vitamin C, hyperbaric chamber. Try some of these things and see what happens. Because you're gonna be dead in 6 weeks anyway. Why not? Let's try it. But they're not even saying that, and it's not all their fault. Because one, they know. Two, there's a standard of care that creates fear, because if they, similar to when I was a dietitian, I had to prescribe low-fat diets for people that had cardiovascular disease, or put people on carbs all day when they have type 2 diabetes, or put people on a low-sodium diet when they have hypertension. If I don't do those things, then I'm practicing outside of standard of care, and I can lose my license. Even though I know those are like the exact opposite things I would actually do. I would put somebody on a high-fat diet with cardiovascular disease. I would put somebody on basically no carbs with type 2 diabetes. But instead, we have to follow these things because of insurance reimbursement, because of standard of care that's created by drug companies, government agencies, that leave us with no ability to apply new research or apply the best methods.
Yeah. It's insane. There's somebody very close to me as well that had cancer, and like I'd prescribed him on high levels of vitamin C. And when she actually told her doctor how much vitamin C she was on, he or she actually told them that they shouldn't be taking anything over 1,000 milligram, which I thought was pretty insane. But what was even more insane is that if you go to this hospital, in the recovery where they spend the afternoon, they spend the night on that menu, they actually have cake on there, and they have and they have red wine. They had both of these things, which I thought was absolutely phenomenal. That if you want to feed a cancer, you give it sugar, and here they were serving sugar. It is frustrating, I know. But anyway, this has been phenomenal. It's been a fantastic interview with you, Shawn, and I have to twist your arm to get you back onto the show, because I feel that we did switch back and forth a little bit, because there's so much that I want to ask you, and there's so much that I still want to ask you. We haven't even touched on supplements and the minefield of that industry yet, which I think would be a podcast in itself. So I'd absolutely love to have you back on, Shawn, if you will. And I just want to extend my gratitude for you to be spreading the word the way that you do, and I hope that everybody listening to this podcast will share this podcast, because there's somebody that they can help, that they can touch, that they may not even know that needs this help at this moment. So how can people find you, Shawn? If people want to get in contact with you or follow you, how can they do so?
Yeah, ShawnWells.com, ShawnWells, and then on Instagram @ZoneHalo, ZoneHalo, or maybe for your side of the world, it's ZoneHalo. So yes, and I would appreciate that greatly. And feel free to actually contact me through Instagram or my website, and I would love to help you. This isn't driven by money. I literally just want to help people. There's nothing I have to sell you. I can send you the document that I helped that lady with. I just literally, it's frustrating me that people are dying, that people are staying sick, and whatever I can do to help people, live a better life, like we were talking about, I'm here to do.
That's very honorable of you, sir. I'm speaking to Jamie Eason this afternoon. We've been going back and forth via text message. She said to say hello to you as well.
I love her.
So hopefully I can get my butt down to Dallas very soon, and I'll meet with her, and it'd be great to hook up with you as well, Shawn.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would love that. That one, we get together, and two, Jamie Eason is probably the sweetest person on earth as a female. I think you're the nicest person on earth as a male. You guys are just the real deal. Like I've got to spend time with her and hang out with her, and she's just the most genuine, sweet person, literally, I think I've ever met. Like, you think like this stuff is an act, and like that people do this for podcasts or media or whatever, but she is just that way. She's just so sweet.
Yeah, she's a very genuine girl. I've known, we were both at bodybuilding.com, God, back 14, 15 years ago now. Yeah, she's the OG.
Exactly. Yeah, and I followed you for forever too, and you're just I love your attitude. For people that don't know, yesterday I got caught in in traffic because of an accident. I didn't have the accident, and I was very late and trying to get to the podcast, and I loved your attitude. Like, hey, things happen. Appreciate it. We'll just talk tomorrow. And your attitude is infectious. I love your positive energy. It's very be here now. Which I want to mention, just last thing.
Yeah, go for it.
My two most important things that have really transformed my life. I really encourage everyone to check these out. One, the 4 Agreements radically transformed the way I think. Please, everyone, just read it. Get the downloadable version and listen to it, whatever. It's really short, profound 4 Agreements on how you approach life and how you think. One of the ones I take to heart most is never take anything personal. People project that on you all the time, and it's a really profound lesson. Great book. The other thing is Be Here Now, a documentary about Andy Whitfield, the guy who was on the show Spartacus, I don't know, about 10 years ago.
Yeah, I actually went to the premiere of that.
Okay, so, when you were talking about India, it reminded me of his trip with his father, where he got that spiritual journey. And one of the things that he mentioned, for people that don't know, he ended up having cancer. He was an incredibly good-looking guy, incredibly fit. I thought like he was going to be like the next Brad Pitt or something. I was watching the show because of him. Like, it was kind of a dumb show, but he was so powerful in the role that, like, you kind of saw bigger things for him coming. Like, I really thought he would have had a massive Hollywood career. And the story that takes place, like, they follow him around for a year with the cameras, and just what happens with how close he ends up getting to his family. He has a wife and kids, and he was kind of estranged from his father, but ends up like going on the spiritual journey to India with him. And his father's not even like a spiritual guy or someone who would have ever gone to India, but because he had cancer, it was important. And his father went with him, and they grew this super close relationship. They had this incredible experience together. And the story, while it's sad, it's certainly sad, it's also powerful and uplifting about being present, being mindful, being appreciative of every day that you do have, and telling the people you around you that you love them and how much you need them in your life, and how much better your life is for them being in it. And there's actually a book that's kind of the progenitor to the documentary, that's Be Here Now by, I think, Ram Dass, and it's very Indian spiritual, so you might want to check that out too. But those are like two things that just profoundly affected my mindset, is 4 Agreements and that Be Here Now. So I'd recommend people check those out.
For sure. We will put the links to that and your website in the show notes, of course, and that's definitely something I'm going to check out now, because, like I said, it was the pre-showing, I think, premiere of that Spartacus that I watched. I remember it was quite uncomfortable within the setting because there was a lot of sex scenes there, and I think nobody knew what to do or where to look for that show. But I'll definitely check out that documentary and put that there. And I totally agree with being present, because we are in a day of everyone's distraction. Nobody can even sit by themselves when their partner goes to the restroom without getting on their device. And then when they do come back, they've got it facing up and they're constantly distracted. And like us having this conversation now, we're very present. That doesn't happen very often. So I don't have anything to read. I don't have my phone or anything like that when I'm eating, because I want to enjoy that meal, the texture, the colors, etc., as opposed to just wolfing it down and go, wow, did I eat? Oh yeah, I guess I did, because we're not present. And we wonder why we get to the end of 2018 and go, wow, that went quick. We got to slow things down a little.
So just last thing along those lines, I do a lot of mindset podcasts too, and you just brought up a big point that's really important to me, is people complain about the quality of friends in their lives. And you have to mindfully put the right people around you. You're the product of the 5 people who are closest to you. So be mindful of who you're putting around you. And you need to actively listen to those people. You need to be present for those people if you want that back. So many people just have distracted acquaintances around them because they're distracted. And you're never giving them that full attention, full engagement, and truly listening to their words. Most of the time when you're talking to someone, you just can't wait to talk over them and get your words out. And for sure, put away your damn cell phone when you're talking to somebody or you're at a dinner. If you have that cell phone on the table, it says, even if it's turned over, it says something. They've done studies on it. Psychologically, it's saying the person that's in front of me isn't really that important. Put that phone away. Absolutely put it away. Stay engaged. Look someone in the eye. Actively listen to them. If you want that friend, then be that friend. Be that person. Be the person that you want in your life. And whatever it is you need to do to put the right 5 people around you, if you have to quit your job, if you have to leave school, if you have to get a divorce, if you have to move, then do it. Because you need to be that person that experiences your full potential, whatever that is. And you can't do that unless the right people are around you. People are holding you back, and you're holding you back. And the longer you stay in that, the more you're creating a culture of that's okay to show up late. That's okay to ghost my friends. That's okay to not really listen. That's okay to not fulfill my promises. And it's not. You're going down a very slippery slope because you do not have the right people around you.
Yeah, that's very, very powerful. Much like when people get to the end of their lives, they'll ask those people the top 5 things that they wish that they'd done more, and the travel comes up, they're more adventure, but I wish I was there for more people. I wish I was able to interact. I wish I was there for my friends. I wish I was more present, So that's definitely a powerful message that we all need to take heed to.
Yeah, no one's going to say, I wish I was on my cell phone more.
Yeah.
I wish I scrolled through Instagram more.
Exactly. All right, well, thank you very much, Shawn, for your time. I appreciate it, sir. And have yourself a great day. And everybody, this is the Knowledge and Mileage podcast. Thank you ever so much for joining me. Please do leave a comment unbiasedly if you did feel that this provided you with any value. Thank you very much.